can put in the comments. Sorry, that startled me. Put in the comments where you're joining in from. Yes, if you can, just put in the comments where you're joining in from, and then we'll go from there. But yes, I'm going to introduce our amazing poets, and they are going to read some of their poems, and we are going to have a conversation. I have some questions for them. They're going to attempt to answer those questions, and then we'll go from there. Okay, awesome. So the first poet on this list is Saddiq Dukogi. Saddiq Dukogi is a Nigerian poet and assistant professor of English at Mississippi State University. He is the author of Your Crib, My Quibbler, Nebraska 2021, winner of the Derek Walcott Prize for Poetry and the Julie Sock Award, and shortlisted for the Nigerian Prize for Literature. His poems have appeared in the Poetry Magazine, Kenyon Review, Prairie Schooner, Narrative Magazine, Plowshares, Guanica Magazine, Poetry London, Best American Experimental Writing Anthology, and the Cincinnati Review. He has received fellowships from the Nebraska Arts Council, Mississippi Arts Commission, and Cave Canem. That is Saddiq Dukogi, everyone. I'm going to introduce the next poet. Actually, yeah, I'll introduce the next poet, introduce all of them before they go ahead and just read in the same order. Okay, so the next poet is Chisom Okafor, a Nigerian poet and clinical nutritionist who lives in Tuscaloosa, where he's studying for an MFA in creative writing at the University of Alabama. His poems have appeared in the Bellot Poetry Journal, Prairie Schooner, the Raven Review, the Hellborough, North Dakota Quarterly, Salt Hill, Sand Journal, The Accounts, Rattle, and elsewhere. So everyone, that is Chisom Okafor. And last but not least poet is Chinua Ezenwa-Ohaeto. Is from Owerri Nkwoji in Nkwere, Imo State, Nigeria. He's a PhD candidate in English at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, and the author of the chapbook, The Teenager Who Became My Mother. His work has won multiple awards and has appeared in the Massachusetts Review, Frontier Poetry, Palette Review, Poetry Island Review, Moreheart Review, Lower Southward Magazine, Valum, Mud Season Review, Lit Mag, Colorado Review, Salamander, Oxford Poetry, and The Republic. So these are all accomplished poets who have done amazing work for African poetry, and I'm excited to hear them read their work. So we'll start with Saddiq.
Hi, I'm just that, right? I just yeah, I couldn't use my office because I just packed all of my books. It was looking weird. So how long do I have to read?
So you have 5 to 10 minutes, yes.
Oh, okay. I'll just read a short excerpt from the book Bacandemia, an Elegy. The book is in 3 sections, so maybe I'll just read excerpt from each of the sections. Section 1 is titled Bayajida, 1455. And Haske, snuggling in the hue of Gobara minaret, winds Lemric every evening until his voice wanes in the noise of worship, sings of Bayajida. He gallops away astride a camel and then a boat, fleeing the lush banks of Euphrates, the Levant, living behind the city near the ruins of Babylon, nuzzling between rivers where a topographer's skilled hands delicately etched municipalities on stones, where poets hewn yesterday's history into today's anthems. There is no benevolence in conquest, for his odyssey in a trance, Bayajida snatches the wings of a crane, a bird mother that visits his dream, crooning of lands of rugged splendor, with farmers growing rice and vegetables at the hill of a desert. For that hymn, he strips her of the pleasure of flight and swallows the discomfort of one-way expedition. May home forever be lost to your wayfaring, but not your heart. May you hunger for her while she forgets you. She causes in her song of anguish. He arrives, Dora, inflamed with homesickness and thirst. They say his turban dangles over his head like needlework woven by the somber fingers of a tempest, a tumultuous crest, with a face half drowned, barely visible. 2. 1376. Pick out the grains of sand from the hoofs of your horse. Reinvent all the places you've traveled. He thought he heard someone say, but no one is in the eerie vicinity. Are you still hungry for myth? Welcome. You can put your luggage in the inn. Drink when we drink. We hold our thirst private for 6 days before quenching them on the 7th. I'm going to show you everything. I'll possess your body with mine. And when I leave the bedchambers of your soul, I shall leave behind the language of our forefathers. You shall speak and be spoken to. Our language is the eye of our culture. Lean in and look. It is not the eyes of hallucination that seized your mind. You have come to steal from us, our people. Kindred spirits, the horseman continued to drink the emptiness of his water gourd, shakes it profusely. It was evening around the time I came out from Black Rock to see over my dominion, shrieking with delight. I lay my hands on his shoulder as he picks the dirt from the wolf horn of his horse. I lifted his turban, slightly revealing his left ear. With a frantic hand of wind, I whisper, I am easing your pain. I am Husky, Saddiq Suleimanu from Jangari, a formless spirit that lurks in the flesh of wind. I love to sing loud. Hear me, hear, O stranger. I have come from Black Rock. I have descended from the hill of sacrifice, drenched in the red tears of a white calf and the sweat of my devotees. I am still lulled by the fervent hymns of Inna, lulled by the clanging of her waist beats, a choir of bells, a symphony, a sonata of reverence and fate. She calls me spirit, dead ancestor, made into a deity by the flaws of my own mortality. I have lived longer than time. Inna beckons me, a spirit, born of death, forged by the power of grief, and resurrected by belief. I'm beyond the confines of time. In the sky, I am the flickering flame. I am the whisper. I am the flow of rivers. I am the wind. I am a call that never wanders. Saddiq Suleimanu, the formless. And when I possess another, Haske. This welcome begins the waning hour of our worship. Loneliness will ring like a long metal horn in the heart of Iskokai. I have seen you come. Every object, every breathing thing has a history. Even though you do not see spirits dancing, they sway in the breeze that stares your windows. It is impossible to exist outside of a story. Life is a loop. We meet again at Ofandora. I was housed in the old and weary bones of Baba al-Majri, his body possessed without the call, without the hysteric dance of Inna. From his eyes of his horse, I saw an oasis of exhaustion, a frail saddle dragged behind in the sand. I humbled myself, adorning my face with an aura of hunger, and stretched out my hands. He could hear the noisy prayers of my bowl, the rattling sound of a single cowrie pleading for alms. He reached into his old Bedouin bag and threw scraps of bread into my calabash, his voice weak, his eyes inane with pain of many nights and days. Made by a pagan blacksmith in Dallahil, he pulled out his sword and said, Beggar, this cannot kill my thirst. I want to fill my gourd with the joy of water and wet my horse with the delight of spring. Also go well, I whispered. Go. 2. From afar, he could see the bright light of the village Dandali, shining like a star gathered inside a lantern. The four of night thickens in the air. He met Haske as a little boy playing with doll made of corn husk. Another boy, legs straddled around the tambourine drum, pounded it again and again with the inside of his palm until the dead animal skin moaned with the eloquent voice of the living. Because there is a line of ancestors behind us, a muted song continues to play in the lute of our bones. From his forehead to my chin, a scar of the spirit that roamed the courtyard of the queen, drawn on two tablet stones. The transcribed prayers of the past to be inherited by our offspring. One day we will disappear, but this town would grow into a dynasty, its shacks and raffia roofs transformed into architecture of stones and hard floors. The ground of Okafor would be carved into mouth, dye pits that would last half 1,000 years and more, where indigo clothes will be worn from the plain fabrics they swallowed. Colorful clothing for the blue men of the Sahara, our own Bedouin tribe. We will sing in the blackening heat of the desert and still eat from the best of earth's bounty. Our song is our history's tomb, carved inward into the ground before the bewailing of anyone who cares to know. We are Haske, twins. Our limerick is the receptacle here. Because of praise songs, we remember what is blurring out at the edges like chalk, tired from overuse. Looking frail, the horseman squints into the blue flames of our eyes and asks, where is Kosogo well? Go, go to Dandali and ask Enna and her true priestesses. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for reading that. Yeah, the poems paint a very vivid picture of the world and it's very immersive. So thank you so much for reading. Yes. Yeah, our next reader, Chisom Okafor. Also, do you prefer Chisom or Kingsley?
Some please.
Okay, okay.
Sorry, this I came into this meeting using my school account, so that's why you see Kingsley there. Um So thank you so much for being such a wonderful host, Delight, and thank you, Chinua and Saddiq and everyone for coming around. When I think of Chinua's poems, I keep I can't help but to think about a how we've managed to create a Bildungs roman in poems and in poetry, and then Saddiq here reading and has me thinking about how history's, the torrents of history keeps shaping our poetic practices today, which is so beautiful. I'm going to be reading three poems. The first poem is titled Acacia, and it's a poem that is written in response to Billy Collins' The First Night. I am holding onto the past like a monochrome photograph to my chest, listening to your heart beat against mine in this untouched dark. You say something about the past not holding water anymore. A forecast of hands, yours held against the darkness. Let them go, you say. The secret to understanding Einstein's thoughts on relativity is not far away from us, you say. There is an orchard of hearts where ours orbit each other against the giant star of death and are hemmed in by a curvature in space-time, never falling completely into it, but never drifting away to in an ever-revolving ring of grief. You read me, Jimenez, in the fading light, straining with each stroke of dusk to catch the printed words above the insurgent cataracts, already overtaking the city of your eyes. The hardest thing about death must be the first night you read. And Billy Collins, you have me wondering if there will also be a sun and a moon, and will the dead gather to watch them rise and set? In a parallel universe, when we had tired the sun with our talking and having sent her down the sky, I see you walk to the gramophone to play my favorite record. a gift of dirges from a father to his departing son. You invite me to a dance, but my limbs, cachetic tonight, collapse just before our rhythmic ritual begins. Medical histories. Brother, you have been here before, where a medical history form asks, have you ever been diagnosed with a chronic disease? I sat beside you at that moment in a common companionship of loss. You felt it before, this particular kind of embarrassment rising inside you like dragon smoke, this customary shuffle, like when you burst into the drugstore after a long walk. You know what it means to be known by your pharmacist, who sees you only through the lens of your illness. On the day of your first diagnosis, you laughed and swore to never again take the world too seriously. There is no right and there is no wrong, you said, just the heart, where there is an angel that kills if you do not follow it. But I saw you holding something in your hands, which seemed like a bird of the night calling out for help. This bird was evil and good in equal measure. The way our childhood game of stone throwing used to be a good omen until your stone shattered a windshield. The way our father would describe a lake in the middle of the world to put us to sleep on nights when there was no electricity in the house and you needed some ventilation. Okay. The last poem is titled Echocardiogram. Cut your heart open, you say, and I open. Who says the dead are farther away from us than the distance between my failing heart and yours, which I count as nothing even now as we soak up the noonday sun. Who says there are no murmurs grinding away beneath me when a miracle of hands pressed on my chest leave me gasping for a last violence of air in sunlight? Take air as vehicle for naked light as it travels in a free fall through a vacuum, half expecting to be caught. Do you know what it means to fall and not be caught till a shattering arrives to offer some relief? Like an agony of lights from 1,000 distant stars, cell phone holding species whose illuminations shed 1,000,000 years back, but without the mercy of being caught midway, are just reaching us tonight. But there are no absolutes, you say, and time, like truth, is relative, which is also to say nothing of the benevolence of the earth that stops all free falls, earth to which all travelers must return. When the day is spent and the dance is over, and I see all the people I ever loved rise before me like vapor from chamomile tea, and I see all the cities I ever fled from return to reclaim from the barren fields, souls which were theirs before time began. These days, I philosophize more on death than the last man caught in the volcanic rage of Pompeii with his daughter, a mass of solidified ash freshly preserved in his arm, as though he was saying to the fire, let her body only be taken by the things she never saw. For the things you possess the least knowledge of do not really kill you. Hear me out. On my first trip to the cardiologist, a man has stared at me in the waiting room as though he was a teacher who has scribbled questions on a rough cardboard surface. What caused your heart dysfunction, son? Was it an excess of nicotine or the freedom of alcohol or both? But I know nothing of these things, just as an owl dies knowing nothing of the etiology of this nocturnal fondness. Why only in empty darkness is where it finds home. But we misinterpret emptiness as guilt, which is why the owl is a curious creature to us. See how easy it is to confuse falling with the act of failing. See how we swiftly tend to fall into the things that fail us. like the reverberations of this cardiac machine, faithful in its representation of how much closer I am to the end of my heart dysfunction than I think. Thank you. I'll stop
Thank,
here.
thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was amazing reading. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for everyone who just joined. Thank you so much. I want us to, like, from the readings you've heard so far, if there's any word that stuck out to you, you can just like put it in the chat. Two words that I'm holding on to right now. I just remember Haske from Saddiq's poem. It was mentioned multiple times. The word that stuck out to me too from Kingsley's poem is stone throwing. So I don't know why, it just was a very vivid image in my mind. I'm gonna give some time to Olongo Africa, one of our organizers, to just talk to us about Olongo Africa and what they represent. And yes, so if Jide from Olongo Africa is on the call, please go ahead and just talk to us about that. Let me see.
I'm so pleased to speak to you guys about our work at Olongo. And so, nice to see familiar faces today. Yeah, our work at Olongo Africa has been to actually contribute to the cultural growth and literary growth of, African, writings. Especially, we want to platform new voices and also, keep up with what the old ones are saying. So far, we have been a magazine, more than a magazine now, right? Because we are committed to other projects. So we have been a kind of cultural stakeholder, I can call it that now, that we have contributed in different ways, including translation, including publishing individual works on our website, and also committed to projects such as documentary films. And we have been trying to platform this particular book talk, if we can call it that, or book reading, can actually be seen as a kind of one of our programs at Olongo Africa, which we started some time back, but we stopped because of other commitments, right? Previously we had a kind of book reading like this for African Poetic Book Fund 2 sets ago. So yeah, our work has been to actually see African writing thrive. And if you check our platform, you will see that it's where you can find, it's not a boast anyways, but it's a place where you can find the finest writings in Africa today, right? We have so many voices that you haven't heard before, speaking around speaking from hearing every corner of the continent. So yeah, so we are so glad, we are so happy to have you here with us today, and then you can continue your program. So yeah, that's all I can say for now, right?
Thank you so much for sharing the amazing work you do for African literature and literature in general. I see that people are putting in the words that have stuck out to them so far. Yeah, please keep doing that. It looks like the Zoom is rounding up.
No, I think we increased the payments now. Is it still giving you the same thing?
Yes. I think what we can do is just like put the link in the chat and like have people rejoin.
No, so what we'll do,
I think it's been upgraded.
we upgraded it very, not long ago. So we should extend now. Yeah.
Okay, that's perfect. Okay, thank you so much.
All right.
So we're gonna go on to our next reader, Chinua. So if Chinua, you can get started whenever.
Hello, Delight. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Thank you to Jide Olongo Africa and people at Olongo Africa for agreeing to host us. Thank you to Chisom too as well for agreeing to be part of this. Thank you to Saddiq for agreeing to be part of this reading. We want to touch base with everybody and share what we have. So I'll be reading approximately 3 poems from the naming. And It's in three parts, so I'm going to pick 3 poems from 3 parts. So the first poem I'm going to read is titled Unfoiling. And as we all know, it's more of an ancestral poem and giving thanks to God, Chukwokike, which is the Igbo, God. I greet you, Chukwokike, God of all existence. Here is Kola to thank you for life, good health, and opportunities. To you, my Chi, I give this Kola, asking you to represent my request anywhere they matter. I greet you, our fathers' fathers, Taibo, Ishibo, Owere, Ishiowere, Iduma, Obashi, Ibegwa, Ohaeto, Ubonna, Ezenwa. You never leave our side. I give you Kola. I greet our dear land, the strong of everything below the sun. Here is Kola. I greet those who live above, those who live in the middle, and those who live below. Kola. I greet this country and hope that someday it will know better. Kola. I greet our enemies, for it is good never to leave anyone behind. Kola. Dear people listening to this poem, Kinsman, here is Kola. Our fathers' fathers, masters of astral travel, bilocation, and shape-shifting, see me. I am here and have been walking with my darkness. I have been in the corner with rotten pears in my mouth. I have spoken so much about the heavy memories in my bones. I have spoken so much about my disturbances that I wonder if anyone listens. Here is to the feature that translates my failures. The heart in my chest, holding my innumerable scars, yearns for a garden of flowers. Our fathers' fathers. It is such a long time since I called myself in our language. I have been asking around to know our people well, to find our right hand. My emptying pockets reveal my struggles before I can speak of them. I am young, so young, and do not want the monkey's hand fighting me to death. I was born in Afode, and the earth is my element. I want to be together with my rabbits. I want to be together with my shards. There is hunger in my wants. There is hunger in my mouth. There are monsters in this country, and they are eating me everywhere. And some dreams keep swimming away from me, swimming away from my grasp. Our fathers' fathers, I know sometimes my face ignores at the light. Do listen as I keep naming the monkey's hand, monkeying me badly. The second poem, Appraisal, still directed towards my ancestors. Our fathers' fathers, I am thankful for all you fought for, the blessings we now enjoy. We adore and adorn you with the appellation of leopard killers. It is well deserved and much more. It is said that when one does a wonderful thing, it is said that when one who does a wonderful thing is appreciated, he feels the eagerness to do another. We are grateful for everything our fathers' fathers. And may I not grow boil in my mouth when words are needed from me. We, your great grandchildren, remain grateful. It is your remarkable day today, and the sky smiles well upon us. You told us the fly that eats with care follows the meat to its origin. And here we are, our fathers' fathers, threading with care and reverence. We have not been conscious enough of our doings. Please redirect and direct us. We carry in our hands a plate of eagerness. We want our hurtings disarmed. We want to understand the things we don't fully understand. When a thing deems itself difficult, the child looks for the father. That's why we are here. You see far, near, beyond, beneath our father's fathers, things our eyes and mortal bodies can't reach. That's why we are here. There is a monkey's hand in our midst, our father's fathers. The monkey's hand is monkeying us badly. Our fathers' fathers, We have never allowed an enemy to laugh at us, but the enemy is saying bad things about us now. They say we do not know what we are doing, but in the sun, I am making a shirt out of its rays. They say we do not know what we are doing, but when people put up land for sale, we buy them. They say we do not know what we are doing, but our Afro beats and Nollywood are becoming great industries. They say we do not know what we are doing, but we go into spaces and places with our writings and Izaga. They say we do not know what we are doing, but our kindred's children are doing marvelously in the universities. They say we do not know what we are doing, but he taught us how to be in two places at the same time. They say we do not know what we are doing, but we are in innovations and donate the most in gatherings. They say we do not know what we are doing, but no masquerade is as big and highly decorated as our Ijele. They say we do not know what we are doing, but Umuabashe, trading and doing great things in many places. They say we do not know what we are doing, but we never put God or any God in a difficult position. Our fathers' fathers, it is known that the strength of a people is resident in their number. Our enemy, the monkey's hand, is growing in number. Do not let the enemy laugh at us. Do not let the monkey's hand do to us bad things. And lastly, I'm going to read from the last part of the poem, and the title is Mercy. I'm going to use a phrase that is like Chukubikozian. So Chukubikozian means God please. And the poem goes, Chukubikozian, make my wants closer as I go for them. I have learned to ask for your mercy by having mercy on myself. I am open to the grace that begets flourishing until I know sufficiency. I am open to the wisdom of first saying I am sorry because it is a greater answer than nailing anger into the wall. I want to have a daughter first, and when she grows, will someday want me to point out the things she may not understand about adulthood. Give me the grace to do the needful, to answer rightly. Chukubikozian, let restraint and patience find me as I find them, so I can teach myself and friends well enough about tenderness. Bikozian, give me the grace to live well and with care, even when my pockets and bones are saying otherwise. And if I ever go hungry, do not let anyone give me poison. It has been long I stopped blaming the robin shooting nails at me. It has been long I stopped blaming the arrows opening my healed wounds. I want to welcome the breeze in the field into my home. I have figured out how much of your light I need to unravel the serpents untooling the gearbox of my beauty. Chukubikozian, I want to have an unmatchable steez. I want to have money, just enough money to match the steez. I promise not to shame my enemies with it. I only want to live well because I want to live well because I deserve to live well and afford good things. Chukubikozian, because okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for reading that. That was an amazing set of poems. I feel like after these readings, everyone here should go and buy all these books. We'll have the links in the books in the chat by the end of the conversation. But I'm going to go into our questions. So a lot of these poems that we've read today from all the three readers, they center around ancestry, right? And I want to ask all our readers, your books talk about like ancestry and mythology. How does your work view your connections to your ancestors? Like, how does your work interact with that? What is your thought process when you are working with mythology and ancestry? So any of the three readers can start first, and want to hear from you.
I can jump and answer quickly. I started writing my epic poem about 4 years ago. It was actually a challenge. Kwame Dawes, I walked into his office one day and he's like, "What's wrong with you African poets? Why don't you like writing epic poems?" And I said I'd do it without even thinking about it. It was silly of me because I spent the next 4 years struggling to do it. It was a dangerous sport, but eventually I did do it. But I was reading some historian, and he was speaking about my people from the north, and he wrote something like, "These are a people without myth," and I thought that was an incredible language of dehumanization, because to say a people without myth is to say they're not a people, right? Because like by virtue of our existence, we're always creating stories. And to say we do not have myth is to say we do not have stories, and to say we do not have stories ultimately means that we do not exist. And I was furious, like I'm like, how dare this person? But I had the wisdom, like to not be angry, or like to channel that into writing art, because if I am a poet and there's this absurd notion about where I come from, and this is, like by extension, even Africa, right? Because like you would always hear people say, like the dark continent, and darkness in their sense is that, like they're ignorant of Africa, and then they're projecting that ignorance, like to mean that it doesn't exist, right? Because I do not know your story, it means you do not exist. And so I started writing poems, remembering some of the folklore that my grandmother told me about Bayajidda, who's a prince from Baghdad. And he's credited with, like the eventually the formation of the seven Hausa kingdom. But it started from a point of resistance, because I mean, in the north, we're now predominantly Muslims. And I was asking myself the question, like if this person who's not even from here, like from the north, is credited with being the mythical figure of the Hausa people, like why is there a resistance, like a Western form of colonization, right? Because like that's colonization, because if we're adopting somebody else, adopting their religion, adopting their names, adopting their way of life, like that's a, a profoundly successful colonial project. And even right now, there's like a resistance of, say, adopting Western culture, but we have completely embraced, like this other culture that comes from the East. Middle East. So I started subverting the myth of Bayajidda, telling the story, but subverting it and engaging with the Bori spiritual practice, which is the religion that Islam replaced in the north. So it's quite a dangerous book. Hopefully, my people wouldn't be pissed, but yeah, it's gonna be fun.
What is good art if it doesn't ruffle some feathers? That's what it's supposed to do. So yeah, I think one thing I got from what you're saying is that if you're angry about something, or something like rubs you up the wrong way, you should like try and create art that speaks to that. Sometimes that's a good way to channel that emotion. So yeah, whoever else has an answer to that.
I think Chinua should go first, because his poems also speak a lot to ancestry more than mine.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, uh, yeah, mine is more of a ancestry than a myth, and so I can't talk about my book without also talking about Kwame does. When I sent the first manuscript to him, and he called me and told me that I should, what if I disconstruct all my manuscripts to produce one? And that's what I did, and I found a common theme in these manuscripts, and it was ancestry. And then being privileged enough to come from a people where, on the clan level, it's kind of I'm the head. On the kindred level, I'm also the head in the lineage of the first sons of the first son. So I knew all the names of my ancestors, and I asked questions. I called my uncles, called everybody. They told me stories about people who came before me, the things they did, the good and the bad things they did. So I use these materials, to project Igbo cosmology as well. And I also found that I was born in Afode. So technically, I'm supposed to be in Wafo, not even Chino. I'm supposed to be in Wafo, because I was born in Afode. And I looked at these elements in Igbo ontology and cosmology, the concept of chi, because I also explored that. Why? Because people sometimes don't even understand the roles of chi from the ancestors, you know. So for ancestry, you know, why people go to the ancestors to ask for, because ancestors, all they do is to guide you and give you advice. And ancestry is based on a collective form, like for the family, for the clan. But on the chi level, it is an individualistic energy, you know, which can also bring you misfortune, fortune, if you do the needful. So in acknowledging these things in my poems, I try to honor my ancestors and my chi and trying to go back to the Igbo roots, and I discovered a lot that I do not even know about in the little research I did, you know, and particularly I based my writing from the aspect of um, Nkwere, Ishiowere, people from Nkwere in Imo State, you know, because each group have their, you know, their way of seeing life, the way of practicing culture, and how they see life. So even, but what I tried as much as to do is to make the Igbo language in the book central. You know, I didn't make it dialectic for certain reasons. So I made it central so that anybody can have a feel of it. And some of the words in the I tried as much as possible to, you know, people will say that you're not supposed to do that, but I made an English version of them. It's either I say it in English or I say it in Igbo. I don't place them side by side. So basically, it's just an exploration of where I come from, being a hybrid of the past, the present. Thank you.
Yeah, and in Chisom.
Okay, yeah. Well, um, my work wasn't really directly addressing my ancestry and identity in the ways that Chinua's work and Saddiq's work did, but I spent a number of years working in the medical sector in Nigeria as a clinical nutritionist. So I met many people. In fact, I was trained to counsel and all, and I had interactions with people, and I realized that what people really need, what people really needed back in the days was a companionship of loss. When they come in to see a doctor or to see a therapist or anything, they want people who would accompany them in that journey, not really people who would give them a solution. And so I carried all the stories I heard with me, and also I found a common ground between the stories I heard and my own medical histories too. And probably that's where history for me comes in. I I needed to address history as it relates medicine and illness, and how this medical theory of someone passing illness to the other and to the son and to the grandson, and something being genetic comes in, and that is also part of what I try to explore. So it's just about medical microhistories, really, not just about of mine, but of other people who I have had the opportunity to be in contact with. And I like to call these things medical micro histories, because they're like very little fragments of histories that come together to become um one whole history for me, and something that made up my book.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think like to jump off from that, I would like to ask like how you explore loss in your work specifically, and how you try to like bring like temper it with light. Because I know like sometimes the things you deal with are very heavy. So like how you try to like run that like medium of like exploring the loss but bringing light and kind of like a salvation to it. You mentioned that, yeah.
Okay, I feel people write. There are two kinds of poets for me. There are poets who write in trauma, and there are poets who write after trauma. And there are poets who go through things and let what they are going through dictate how they write. And there are poets who wait till they've gone through what they've gone through, and then they look back and they write looking back. But I feel I feel both groups are not wrong in their approach, but I think one thing that has one good advantage with looking back afterwards is that you tend to you tend to find areas that would make you laugh. You tend to find joys in the things that you felt were um in the situations that you felt were hopeless at all. So I tend in my writing to talk about sadness sometimes, but also talk about light as well, because there's always light. There's always light if we look deep enough. There's always places, points in our situations, in our traumas where you would find beacons of light and things that should give you, a little bit of hope, right? And that's what I try to hold on to too, even when I write about things that are not happy things, right? But then you also try to look at the other side, that little often unnoticed side. And I try to also make my writing interrogate that as well. So to answer your question, I feel it's just for me a matter of searching carefully every situation, and in my own case, chronic illness, right? A matter of trying to figure out, okay, this is what you have to write about. This is what makes you really stay up and maybe want to cry and all. I want to write about this, but also what makes you want to be alive the next day after writing about this. And also, I try to write about those things too. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
trying to
that's
find
very
a middle ground.
yeah, that's very important. Thank you so much for sharing that. And for Saddiq, I wanted to ask you, your poems kind of like are inspired by the growth tradition of the Bakandamia. So how do like traditional poems influence like your poetic style? Because you have a narrative act to it, and I feel like a lot of like traditional griot style poetry have like narration in them. So how do like those forms influence the kind of poems you write?
I mean, taking up that title is actually hubris, because what it means is like the praise singer's master poem. And I'm quite young, so I shouldn't be in the business of writing a master poem. But I think particularly in Nigeria right now, there's like often that conversation of who is a Nigerian poet and what is Nigerian poetry. And sometimes, like in the noise, like we fail to even study, like the kind of writing that is coming out from Nigeria. And I was asking myself the question, like what tradition do I come from, right? And I'm like, yeah, well, I come from a place where, as far back as the 11th century, there was already poetry, right? It wasn't written in English, but like it already existed. And this is like a sort of a subtle shade, like to that, like I come from Maman Shatta. I come from Nana Asma, who wrote in the 1800s. And similarly, some of the poets that I admire today, some of my contemporaries. And so all of those voices help shape, like my poetic sensibility. And I thought since I was engaging with history and this great tradition that has existed, like for a very long time in the North, perhaps it's an opportunity to harmonize all of my influences that ranges, like to Sufi poetics, to Eastern European poetics, and also my love for T.S. Eliot and some of the people that I read, because it's a convergence of all of those influences, including Khalil Gibran, So like looking at me, for instance, and my version of poetry, like it has to trace back to that griot tradition, but it also diverges into a lot of other traditions. And so like I thought it was an opportunity to harmonize all of those sensibilities in the book itself.
Yeah, thank you. And it's really working out. Thank you so much. So Chinua, I wanted to ask you, so the poems you read, you modeled it like a prayer to the ancestors right before like kola nut is shared. And I'd like to know like what influenced that like style and that form, using like that as a form to like put this poem in.
So actually, the first poem I read about giving thanks to my ancestors and people, like let me just give the background of the whole arc collection. So the first poem started by calling on a kingsman who is kind of from my place. Dear kingsman, there's something happening now. I can't do this alone. We need to go back to where we come from so that we can speak to our ancestors. And then we picked cola, dried gin, and alligator pepper, and we went to our village. And that's how the second unfoiling started, So this is a way of reclamation, trying to reclaim identity, culture, heritage, being in a tune to it. Because just like we said, we need to document all these things. I don't think stuffs about Igbo culture is, they are documented enough, and people are doing. I don't think they are doing enough, right? And starting with naming, the names, So the concept of the naming is that I am naming these bad things, the monkey's hand, which is the bad things are the monkey's hands that are monkeying us badly, So these monkey's hands have been doing a lot to us, both as a country, as an individual, and as on the kindred level. So just like I said, we go to ancestors to ask for guidance, to ask for advice, to ask for what they know, and that communication, where there are there are different modes of communication, and the communication is complete when I speak to you, you listen, and you're able to respond. Some people come like, did you hear back from your ancestors? Are you able to hear back from your ancestors? Well, for the naming, they didn't respond. But for the next book, they responded. Right? The next book that I'm working on is already done. They responded through the medium of DPFA, the divination master in Igbo culture. So they use the Ogili seeds, to divine, to speak to those who are gone, to get information from them and give to the living, right? So that's what I did. And they responded and telling me stop, right? So actually, in real life, they still respond because they can come to you in dreams, they can come to you in various manifestations. But before these things can happen, the individual needs to be attuned, needs to be in one with them. Because if you are far away from them, if you are not close to them, if you don't revere them, if you don't call on them, they will not respond. I believe there's energy everywhere, and these energies respond regarding on how we give them up, on how we relate with them. So my poems relate in all this stuff, trying to tell people, hey, this kind of thing happened in this part of the world where I come from. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for reading that. Yeah, I'm gonna give time to audience questions afterwards, but I wanted to ask a couple more. What was the hardest poem for you guys to write? I know Saddiq mentioned that one of his poems took 4 years. So I just want to hear from you guys the hardest poem for you guys to write and why. Why was it really hard? So yes. Anyone can go first.
For me, it was difficult because my book is one poem, so it's one thing, which even though I knew what I wanted to do, it was difficult to find a vessel that could contain it. And it's a book where there are a lot of characters, and a lot of the characters are speaking. And so to find a medium that would do justice to that. I had to think not just as a poet, like being guided by the lyric, but like thinking about writing a poem as though I was writing a book of fiction, right? Like with the characters defined, with the narrative arc, holding on to it. And I was reading a lot of fiction books just so I could learn how to hold the story true because I wanted it to sound like a story, but also retain some of the qualities that we know poetry to have. So it was quite difficult for me, and I spent a lot of time just scribbling the words, and before I found a shape that would contain it all. And I remember I figured that out when I was reading Khalil Gibran's The Prophet and T.S. Eliot's The Four Quartet. And I found formal instruction from those poets. And once I figured it out, it was easy to stitch together.
Yeah.
I think yes, I absolutely agree with Saddiq. For me, I feel writing about chronic illness in my case may be a bit difficult. It's often difficult really because I'm not people tend to read what you've written and they tend to think that, oh, all of these things in the world are happening to you, right? But I find it hard sometimes to create some distance in between poems that are made up of people's accounts and poems that are made up of the things that are happening to me, right? Because I've listened, I worked with a lot of people over time, and I felt strongly that their stories need to be told. But then again, how do you tell the stories so that they do not become yours? And then how do you also tell your own story alongside their story so that yours is represented as yours and theirs are represented as theirs? And there is this very thin line. You have to go back and forth and back and forth, and just to be sure that you're doing the right thing, both ethically and every other in every other aspect. So I feel it wasn't really the craft, the writing process itself, but it was the other things that comes with it, the other questions of representation that really that was really a bit tricky for me to navigate.
Yeah, those are very tricky things to navigate. And I think what I'm getting from this conversation is that poetry and stories are an archival process. It is a way to tell the history of a people. And there have been conversations about if we're like stewarding our history as well, and sometimes even some weird conversations about how like outsiders can do it better for us. And I think like we have in our midst a group of amazing African poets who are archiving history, who are archiving the present in their amazing works. If people in the audience have questions, you can put it in the chat and I will take some questions from the audience. And also,
can I say something real quick? Sorry, just before I forget what I wanted to say. I just wanted to add, I'm so sorry, that I had one more problem of family representation, like what questions about you do you not want your family to know? Because they're going to read your book. What questions about you do you not want people who know you to know? How personal do you want these poems to be, and so on and so forth. Just what I wanted to add real quick.
Yes. And like, yeah, if anyone else had any thoughts they wanted to add to that, please go ahead. I'll put links in the chat to purchase books, but okay, I see one question. Let me read it out loud. Okay, I think the question is related to Saddiq about being cautious of subverting Hausa meat, and why do you think people might be uncomfortable with your rendering? So Saddiq, if you want to answer that question, go ahead.
Wonderful question, Lillian, and thank you so much for your warmth and for being here, and also for everybody who's here to listen to us. And there's two amazing poets, Chisom. Although Chisom, are you with Kristen Kingsley now? And Chinua.
That's I'm still trying to do away with the colonial trend. it's just I did it with my school account and I had to use Kingsley. So it's my official first name for now.
All right. Lillian, I'm not, I mean, the book is done, and I can tell you that not just my people, but a lot of people will not be happy. But that's not the reason why we write, right? Because we write to archive. I'm somewhat apolitical, like I'm not very good with politics. So whatever thing that I think, I put in my poems. And for a very long time, I have been asking myself the question. For instance, when I arrived in America in 2018, I was asking, where are my people? And when I said, where are my people? What I meant is, like, where are the Muslims, right? Like I needed to go know where the mosque is. And I started going to mosque and, I introduced myself as Saddiq. And the dude, he's from Saudi Arabia. He's like, that's not how to say the name, like, I'm like, well, oops, it's late for you to correct it now. I'm 29, and for the last 29 years, that's what I've been calling myself. But I started thinking about religion, spirituality, and even though I read the Quran in Arabic, I can read Arabic, but I do not know how to speak Arabic. And they would like to ask questions like, like, do you know how to read the Quran? And I remember one day I was a little bit annoyed by the question. And I'm like, if we're talking about faith, like I think that, like I'm a better Muslim than you are. And he looked at me and I'm like, because I don't even freaking speak the language and I believe, like that's a leap of faith. But I started thinking about religion and, like asking the question, like before the coming of Islam, what was the religion of my people, and looking at Islam from the point of view of a colonial project, right? And this is quite a remarkable thing to say because like my relationship with Islam is unremarkable, like I believe, but I also, like I'm aware that, like it's a colonial entity because, like my name is Saddiq, like it's not indigenous to Nigeria. My name has changed, like my way of spiritual anchoring has changed, my culture has changed. And so I am resisting that, right? Because like even though I am Muslim, I'm saying, well, like I think there's something to say about our own indigenous ways and we shouldn't relinquish those. There was a day I was joking with my wife and I'm like, when we have a daughter, we should name her Dari. Dari means night in Hausa. And she was like, that's such a terrible name, like that's not a good name. And I said, how about Layla? And she's like, yeah, like Layla is a beautiful name. I'm like, well, but Layla also means night, like why do you think one um is terrible and the other isn't? Is because, like by way of religion, I mean, even Christianity, we've been thought conditioned to relinquish our own spiritual ways, like it's been fetishized and ridiculed in some ways. Like the indigenous spiritual practice, like the Bori, I mean, it's been pushed to the fringes, right? And I'm bringing back that conversation that before Islam came and replaced our spiritual ways, like this was what the people were doing. It's like an animist spirit, and they were worshiping um, spirits and genes. And so the book is largely told from the point of view of one of this animist spirit. And I think the light picked up on it. He's husky, like he's a shifting spirit, and he is deriding the loss of the religion, the indigenous religion of the North, and blaming some of the social problems on, like, oh, you have embraced new God, and like look at what's happening to you now. Like if you had continued to worship us, like you wouldn't suffer some of the consequence, like of your action. So you have turned your back on us, and we are turning our back on you. So I'm not afraid of whatever backlash would come because the book is done, but I think history is important. And I'm very much a Muslim. I'm very spiritual, But, like there's in a poem of mine that I wrote that, like asking question is not a way into blasphemy, it's a way out of it, right? Because when you believe, like you ask questions, and I want to assert myself, I want to assert my own ways, my own language, my own culture. But yeah, that's such a good question, I'm just preparing the ground, like I don't want people who like me to dislike me.
Well, thank you so much for answering that question. Yeah, and I think one of the things that African poets especially deal with when we're dealing with like storytelling, people's story, like Kingsley mentioned, when we're dealing with our own story, when we're dealing with history, is that we feel this heavy weight to be as true to form as possible. Like there's this like temptation to when you're to want to like be as close to possible as history because you're worried that people will take issue to certain things which should not be our trouble. We should not have to like worry about that. The poet's job is to write a poem and to follow their poetic inclinations. And so I wanted to ask the group how moving homesteads has influenced your research project. Because Kingsley, you mentioned that like you read about like chronic illness and people's story and your work as a clinical nutritionist. And then Chinua, you mentioned your conversations with uncles. Saddiq, you mentioned your own research project. How has moving homesteads like influenced the way you research your work? Yes, so we can go around and talk about that.
Well, let me jump on this. The homestead, So for me, it means a lot. Just like I've said before, in the place where I come from, what we call Obi, is my place, and on a kindred level, on a clan level, kind of the head of the whole, you know, whole town, because of this lineage. So it's important because I have to know these things. I have to know these things. And even at this level, I do not know enough about where I come from. To my own shame, I didn't even know the name of the river which I visited when I was a kid. And also as an adolescent, I had to make calls for the name of the river to be mentioned to me. So homestead is also home, where I'm free, where I recognize my people, where I find stories. Sometimes you've read, it's already known that when you need stories, that stories are at home. So I go to I call my uncles, I call my mom, I call my relations, and I ask a lot of questions about these things. You know, and it was in my questioning that I even found out my people, Ikaibo, the son of Iduma, left an area in Abo in Delta State and migrated to the current place where we now have in Imo State, where my people are settled now. So technically, I also have an origin in Delta State, and it was an eye opener when I heard about it that we actually migrated from a place in Delta State. And there were other stories, about also a tree and the relevance of that tree, why the tree is what it is. So for whatever reason, I'm not going to share a story about the tree, but it is a wonderful thing to know about these things of my people, of the place I come from. And I try to document them, so that whoever is interested later in the future would have a material for this thing. So to say is a source for creative strength. It is also a source of reclamation. So that's what I can say so far about homestead myself.
I think the idea of home, if that's what you're asking, sorry, I was sort of distracted when
That's
was talking
exactly
about.
what I'm asking. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I think the idea of home has, I mean, still remains in my poetry in terms of maybe the language I use and even more so the things I write about. I mean, when you take poems to workshop, they tend to say that your poem doesn't, I don't know. Well, something like your poem is Nigerian, kind that sort of thing. But I think I like that I have had a chance to leave home because that re-emphasizes, even more that idea of home for me. This thing people say that you do not know what you have until you leave it, right? I tend to gravitate back towards home in many ways and in as much ways as I can in terms of maybe the metaphors and everything that I use, and then the things I choose to say. For instance, there was a poem I wrote about someone walking to a hospital in an emergency because in Enugu where I was born, someone would probably walk to a hospital in an emergency. But then they were like, no, the person has to drive to a hospital. Who walks to a hospital? This sort of thing. And so I feel that in every way, um in every way, my thoughts and everything that I do still reflects that identity, that my identity and that idea of home to me, if this is what you want me to answer.
Exactly, yes. Thank you.
I think even though they're like I keep coming back to this, but I'm like always amused the way that I have grown so attached to Nigeria, even more so after leaving Nigeria. I realized that, like when I left Nigeria for the United States, I carried with me more than my luggage. I carried, like the weight of memory, the hum of my mother's voice when she's praying, the dust of Mina, particularly in the night, the smell of street food in Kaduna. I think when I came here, I grabbed some sand, like from my daughter's grave. So like Nigeria has been with me, not to romanticize Nigeria, like some of the struggles, but sometimes when you leave, you realize there are like a lot of things that you have taken for granted. Like all of the food that I didn't like when I was in Nigeria is like the food that I am lost in after. Like a few weeks ago, I was talking to my wife Saddiq, and I said the only reason why I want to go to Nigeria is so that I can eat all of the foods that I see on social media, because I just miss it so much. But the older I grow, the less home resembles a place. It is a kind of a ritual of needing, like pounded yam in my Starkville kitchen, the warmth of a WhatsApp call from my father, the way my children, like tell everybody that they're Nigerians and they want to go to Nigeria. And so like I'm in this weird space where a lot of things do not make sense to me. And so like I go back to the poems and I'm trying to kind of reclaim a static homeland. Instead, like I find myself building new one from fragments of what I remember of the old. Like the first time I went back to Nebraska in after living in Nebraska for a year for Starkville, Mississippi, I returned and I was just overwhelmed with emotion. And I was tearing up and I was telling my wife and she's like, I'm such a baby. But I'm realizing that more and more places are becoming home. And my writing, like it's a place where I have the quiet to reflect on what it means to me. Um, But yeah, I think moving here didn't change my poetry. It just rewired my soul. And now home is no longer a dot on a map, but a chorus of voices, like a collage of smell. I love food so much. You're not going to be able to tell by the size of my body, but I love food way too much. And my kitchen is very much Nigerian. And even though there are like some people who want to strip me of my Nigerianness, I'm like, like if I fly to Mars, like I'm going to be there as a Nigerian and I bring my Nigerian sensibility to Mars. So I'm just a Nigerian who's happens to be in Starkville, Mississippi.
That's a very powerful imagery, very, very powerful imagery. And I'm thinking now about like the names of all your book collections, because very interesting names and they capture the imagination. So I want you guys to talk some about like how you decide to name a poetry collection. That just feels like a task on its own, and like what feels like the right name, how you decide which name feels like the right name.
Chinua, Chinua, you should answer this. You're very proud of your book title.
Well, okay, okay. I'll start. Well, the naming. It's just one of the poems I wrote, some long time ago, and it was a poem that I read at Sheldon Museum, and the poem became part of the collection. So I was looking for a title that defines or connects the whole arc in the book. And I thought of lines in the poems, nothing was, coming, and I thought about the titles of each poem, and I looked at the naming, and I remembered I even mentioned naming more than once in the book that I was trying to name things, name names, name bad stuff, name good stuff, name the things I want also to happen in my life. And I said, wow, that's a good thing. Yeah, the naming. So I chose the naming. I don't have a tangible and exquisite, story about it. It's just something I just picked the title of my poem collection and gave it to the
Yeah.
collection.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. If anybody wants to add to
Yeah.
that, I can go to the next question.
Yeah, I can just say something real quick. When
Yes.
when Paddy say something about Chinua's book title, what came to my mind was the naming is here, because that was the first thing I saw when he was doing his book release. But yeah, what I feel, what influenced my book, the title of the book was what was happening in the book, really. The thing is, we are all witnessing to stuff. We're all bearing witness to either our own histories or to the micro histories of the people who we have come across. But then we are always witnessing. And as for the wings, I keep thinking about Borges, who went to the Sahara and towards the end of his life, and then scooped up a handful of sand and then let the sand sift through the gaps between his fingers and then proclaim to the world that he has modified the Sahara. And I'm thinking, how do we modify the Sahara of our own minds and make it reflect on the poems that we read? And I'm like, oh, it may be interesting if these witnesses were sort of a modification of, they were performing a modified art of witnessing, and in this case, witnessing with wings. And that was where the title, Winged Witnesses, came up.
My book borrows its title from a very popular song by Mamman Shatta, Bakandamia. And again, like when the praise singer has attained, so much power and stardom, like in that tradition, they sing their own Bakandamia, which is just a praise song to themselves, to show how great they are. So it's also hubris. Um, um, so I thought, like it would be a good title, like for the book, because then it ties neatly into that tradition. And also, like it's that ego thing that all poets have, singing one's own praise song.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I think that's powerful. Speaking of powerful, this is the most popular definition of poetry. It's what's what definition? Like the powerful overflow of spontaneous emotions, right? And not everyone agrees with that definition. I have qualms with it, but for this purpose, I'm thinking about how the stereotype is that African men are not in touch with their emotions, right? And I see three African men on this call who are exploring their emotions in poetry. How do you guys feel to be the arbiters of your race? Sorry. How do you guys feel subverting that like stereotype of like emotions are not accessible like to African men specifically, which is not true, but that's what the media projects, that's what culture projects. And I see a lot of African men on this call who are exploring their emotions in poetry. So if you guys want to speak on that, we'd love to hear about it.
Oh,
Chisom, how about you start this one?
Well, okay, okay. Like I wouldn't like going second, please. But okay, but yes, I just remembered when you were asking this question, when you were asking this question, the many times I had, because where I worked in Nigeria was close to Yabatech, so many times I would go into Yabatech and mingle with the students and just stay there for a while. So many times while writing this book, I had gone to Yabatech and I had cried, because of the weightiness of some of these poems. And yeah, think I think I think people shouldn't be ashamed of expressing emotions for real, or whether physically or in books. People should not be ashamed of doing that. Um and I also feel that lies that is what forms the core of my collection. The fact that I wrote many of these poems in a very sad state. And I wrote some of these poems when I had already left the sad state. But then many of them at the peak um of my let's say, should I say sadness, right? So I feel this more and more poets should start exploring that, and they should not, people generally should not, Africans generally really should not be ashamed of expressing emotions in any way they would want to.
Well, just to say a few words to that, I don't think, because I think that all poems are emotional, right? It's coming from a place of emotion, because, emotion can be anything, so for to even write, you're an emotional human being, right? And to express yourself in any way is emotion. So, and sometime I've been writing about my dad for in a good number of poems that have been published, and also about my mom. I've also written an essay on my dad as well. So writing about these things is an intensive exercise. The memories, the childhood, the loss, things that disappeared after the loss, and the problems that came after the loss. The contrast of the good times and the bad times. All these bring memories, and memories that are hinged on emotions. So um, I think all writers are emotional, all right? Because if you're not emotional, how would the person be able to convey certain things, or if not anything at all? So I think we're all emotional, I guess, and I'm emotional. I am an emotional human being because I can be happy, and I can also be annoyed. And we also
Yeah.
have 5 minutes, and there's also a
Yeah.
question in the
I
chat.
was
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and ask the question. You want to say something, Chisom?
Yeah, I was just wanting to say something about the conversation I had with Obinna, who is here, Obinna Emeka, for boring conversations, and he said something about the traditional African society, the traditional African father wanting you to be a man and to man up in the face of challenges and particularly medical challenges and all. But then again, this doesn't work all the time, and we should cry sometimes. We should cry when we want to cry for real.
Okay, I'm gonna take the question in the chat. So it says, how did you all decide what goes in and what goes out of the book? I asked because I understand research and stories might widen so much you have to decide what appears and what doesn't.
Personally, for me, it's like what things, what feels like urgent, what needs to be said. And also like each time that I write, like I rarely throw away things, right? Because like I would be moved to explore it. And if I move to explore it, like I might think there's something that I want to convey here. Of course, not all of the language would go in, but once it's sing and once it feels like um, it reads like it belongs to the thing, like I just let it be there. And I have one bad habit, like I'm like, well, I'm just the writer, like at the point of editing the book, the editor would tell me what doesn't need to be there. And the book was about 150 pages long, one poem. And when I was working with Kwame Dawes, he caught about 50 pages, like so. So I just trusted, like the process. At first it was a lot to take, but like ultimately, like when you're working with experienced editor, you come to see, because sometimes we need distance, like from our own work, and we might not always be the best judge of our own work, right? We need, like some other eyes. And so maybe like I don't worry myself about those things, because I just want to get all of the language out of my system, right, onto the page. And once I have it, like I have friends that I trust, like I share some of it with them, and they're like, well, you don't need this. Of course, I'd have to think about it, but yeah, I just try to write because I'm like, yeah, that's the most important thing. The other things are just cosmetic, right? And hopefully, like if you have a system around you, um, they would help you know what to cut. But I think I put everything in there until Kwame just pushed out 50 pages. I
Yeah,
promise I'm not angry
since
about
since
it.
yeah, since we all have the same editor, mine was not up to 50. I think mine was approximately 20-25 pages was cut out. So
You're a genius now.
no, genius what to have. Uh, so so I don't have much to say about this because you have already said everything about what goes in and goes across of certain perception and the editor's perception as well. And sometimes there was a poem in at least the last poem I read. I fought for that poem to be in that collection. I went to his office and told him, no, I want that. And he told me, all right, two only. And I had to put them. So that's all I can say. Sometimes you say things and circumstances might have them out.
Chisom, do you want to add to that?
Nothing much really. I think they've said what I wanted to say, and Kwame also cut some of my poems out. I feel I feel I feel I feel I try to include as much as I can, and as I grow in my experience and in age, I've had less and less to cut out in my work. I don't know why, but I just have. I'm I'm just wanting to say more and more and more and have more and more and more things to say. But thanks to Kwame as Saddiq and Chinua pointed out.
Thanks to Kwame for sure. He's doing an amazing work, because here we mentioned like archiving African poetry, archiving African stories, because it's very important to our identity as a culture. And the work that Kwame does is doing with African Poetry Book Fund is phenomenal. I feel like that by itself, and they also have an archive of African poetry. If you go to the website, they have an archive of African poetry, which, like, if you want to explore like the archives of African poetry, it's not comprehensive yet. It's a work in progress. You should definitely check that out. Well, thank you so much to Olongo Africa. Thank you to our readers. Thank you to our amazing audience. You guys were participating throughout. You guys go purchase these books. They are amazing. We are going to support the work of African poetry. Should I let Olongo Africa ask that question? Let me see. Oh, out of time for. Since you are our sponsors, I will let you.
Oh, okay.
Go, please.
Hello, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I've been listening and watching and very interested in all your works. I've bought all the books, the links you put there. I have a short question about translation, and I want you guys to speak to it because something that has interested us for a while. I know that the production of literary content in African languages have not been sustained over the years by a number of reasons, but have you in your own different communities found poetry in your languages that you think might be worthy of translation, and would you be willing to do that along with the work you do in writing original work in your own language? Or maybe you intend to write in your own languages as well. Has any one of you explored that opportunity, and what does it mean to you? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kola, for that wonderful question. I think it's important to write in indigenous languages, indigenous African languages, right? Because like that's how to preserve those languages. Right now, I'm currently working with a translator who's going to translate the book into Hausa, and the hope is that we can have both the English version out and the Hausa version out at the same time, because if this is a story that is written about a certain people, I think like the least we can do is give them the opportunity to also read the story in their own indigenous languages. And some of the things that we're doing, like writing in English, even though I think that English is now my own language too, I love to say that I'm a native speaker of English. I mean, it came to us violently, and it's mine now. I want it, and I'm going to keep it. But it's important as we preserve the English tradition, as we stretch the English tradition, it's important to stretch our own tradition too, because if we don't, then all of our language would die out. The reason why some civilizations have endured is because they wrote in their own languages. They kept those stories alive. They kept the culture alive. So I think it's a very important work. And I want to pay homage to the work that you do also, Kola, in translation, because it's very essential. It's one of the greatest service that we can do, to our languages, because if we don't, they would die out.
Yeah, to also take up from there. I've thought about this so many times, because I have someone who is also doing something in their own language with Atelewo, and I'm always envious of that, because in my own language, Chisom, do you know of anybody doing anything with our language in translation? I don't think there is.
Except me, I am right now. Okay,
I am too, and I'm going to speak on that.
Okay. It's great we are defending ourselves. That's wonderful, because I can write perfectly in Igbo. I chat in Igbo, but I don't see things being documented in Igbo, or even competitions hosted for Igbo creative writers. The only thing I see is that you have individuals who come on social media and represent Igbo, present it in Igbo, like Omarachi Atama does, and so many other people doing. But we don't have an archive. So that's the problem. That's what I'm trying to refer to, Delight and Chisom. We don't have an archive on that. But we have, Yoruba people, because when you want to progress, you have to look at what other people are doing. So I've looked at Atelewa, I've looked at other those competitions. They have archives, even they do documentaries, and there is none. from the east, in Igbo people, and I don't know what the problem is actually. I have asked a few questions about it, and the discussion is not taking me anywhere. But I am confident that something will change. I think something starts when an individual, initiates it, and I am thinking now of possible ways of making this something that is feasible, to the Igbo people and to Igbo speakers as well. Chisom, do you want to say something on this? Because
yes, true. I just recently started working on translations just because I took a translation course last fall, and I've been very interested in translating poems by should I say first generation Igbo poets, those that wrote in 1970s or 1960s when the Central Igbo was just being formed. And so I have one here. It's called Otarante by Nolue Emenandro. I am trying to translate that.
I mean, I know the guy.
Yeah, yeah, and some other book too. So I think the other one I started working on is Abuche, if you know Chinua, you may know Abuche. Yes.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
But I feel we've not even scratched the surface, and we really need to do a lot of work. And just as you said, I 100% agree with you. And please, can I just give a quick shout out to what Obi Nemeka is doing with Boring Conversations? He's doing such an excellent job. Please let's check out Boring Conversations on YouTube when we can.
Yeah, I agree with you as well on this.
Sorry, I'm going to add to this. I'm not in the conversation, but I mostly work with fiction. So I took a translation course as well. So I've been translating from Ukwarogeya into English as a guide for people who don't read Igbo to read together. So reading them together. Also, this book of poems, it's called, this book of poems, you can't really say it. I've been working on translating that as well. Okay. So yeah, I think it's very important. But one thing I think also that we should think about is translating African language to African language, because the English to Igbo, English to Hausa, English is good. But Saddiq, your poem too, we can talk about translating to Igbo as well, right? Let's have that conversation within languages. I think it also grows the conversation where we're not just exporting the languages, but yes, it helps grow it well.
Yeah, I think Delight, you're absolutely right. Particularly in Nigeria, where a lot of us still do not understand each other. I feel like having those stories in each other's language, could bridge a lot of cultural gaps that exist. Yeah, that's I'd be interested in that, absolutely.
Right, I think we've come to.
Yes, we've come to the end. Thank you guys, everyone, once again. No, any more surprise questions? Okay. Well, thank you guys once again. This was an amazing conversation. I am so delighted to have met all you amazing poets. I will see you sometime in the future. Bye.
All right. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chinua. Thank you, Delight. Thank you, Olongo Africa. Thank you all so much for coming around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the poetry collection I was talking about.
Oh wow.
I'm trying to read what is this. Is it Apamozo?
Abu, hey God, Chineke, my pronunciation is not going to.
If I can see, I can't even see.
Akwamozu.
Akwamozu.
Abu.